So we definitely have food, but first off, I wanted to introduce Chris. 1 month ago in the Salem Methodist Church in my hometown of Barrington, I got the opportunity to listen to Chris talk, and it was probably one of the most impactful nights that I've had for a while. What he said really touched me. He had a lot of insight to share about human trafficking as an issue in the Chicagoland area and what we could do exactly as students and kids to combat the issue. So let's give a huge round of applause for Chris.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Yeah, we met about a month ago, and it was a cool night because it was a fundraiser for this church, and Nabil and some of his friends were there giving a presentation about what they did over the summer, going to the UN and the work that they're doing with Chess Without Borders. And I was really intrigued, and I love that because I love to see young people getting involved in using their gifts. And we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight by telling you what I do. My name's Chris. I'll give you a little bit of background on me. I'm a 46-year-old married father of 3. My kids are 18, 14, and 11. I grew up in South Central Los Angeles, and I know that this probably won't be hard for you to believe, but I'm a tattoo artist. I went through some pretty trying times as a kid. My dad left us when I was 14. I was in high school. At 16, I dropped out to take care of my family and worked hard my whole life. And wanted to prove to my dad that I could be successful, even through my circumstances. And I was. I worked for a company for 20 years. I met my wife, Lisa, my high school sweetheart. We started our family. And through that, we went through some pretty serious trials and tribulations. I was never a gang member. I always like to start by saying that. But all my friends were. I lived on a street called Centerview that ran north and south from Carson to Compton to Inglewood to Watts. You guys are probably too young to remember the Rodney King riots. You probably heard about them. That's where I lived. And I watched my city burn down. But as a kid, I was never dragged into the whole gang thing because they knew that that wasn't me. It's not what I was about. I was an artist. I've been an artist as long as I can remember. My parents weren't real big on us watching TV when I was a kid, so I started drawing, creating art. And I was a graffiti artist and an airbrush artist and did some commissioned work for some cool TV stuff as a kid at 16, 17 years old. But I watched 17 of my friends die as a kid. In fact, the last one of my best friends, his name's Dante. It's gonna be 10 years ago on Thursday that he passed away. He had just gotten out of jail, the LA Twin Towers jail. He was there for 2.5 years, paying time for things he did while he was a gang member. And when he came home, we did what we did for everybody when they got out of jail. We threw a party for him. And we had a great day. And Dante had told us how he wanted to change his life and he wasn't going back to that old gang life. And he wanted to finish school and go on to college and make a career for himself and build a family. And we all kind of joked about it. And our wives and girlfriends had gone home. We were kind of hanging out, playing dominoes into the late night. And at 11:47 p.m., we were all out in front of his mom's house. And it was pretty dark out. A lot of the street lights had been shot out. But there was a Chevy Tahoe down at one end of the street. And it kept coming up, back cruising around the block. And it came up that one time at 11:47 p.m. and cut the headlights off. It came screaming up at the block where there were 6 of us standing outside Dante's mom's house. Passenger side window rolled down, shotgun stuck out. They called out his name, they shot him. My friend was shot in the chest. He was dead before he ever hit the ground. And I was 5 feet away from him. I went home, I told my wife, Lisa, I said, I love you, I love our kids, I love LA, but I want our kids to have better than this. And you know, she'd been from Chicago, she was born and raised in Chicago until she started like junior high. And we talked about it, we said, where can we move? We want a fresh start, somewhere that has the same kind of cultural diversity as Los Angeles, same kind of music and arts and culture. because that's important to us and it's important to us when we're raising our kids as well. And we talked about it and we said, we've been to Chicago a number of times for stuff for your family, and weddings and stuff like that, vacations. He said, it's got all the things that we're looking for. It's a beautiful city. They don't have any gang problems at all. Let's move to Chicago. And we did. And we really thought that when we moved here. And when I say here, our family lives in Oswego, so we don't live in Chicago. Okay, so we're right down the street. I went through some pretty radical changes in my life about 8 years ago now. Very positive changes. And decided that at 37 years old, I wanted to live for something bigger than me. I was a tattoo artist on the side. I loved that. I never liked my job in logistics. I was miserable. I was a miserable person to be around. I was never happy. No matter how much money I made, I was never happy. And I decided that I was gonna basically ask God what he wanted me to do for the rest of my life, and I was gonna serve the community because I wanted to make a difference. And I started looking into that, like, what can I do? We look at the problems in the world today, like, what can we do? There's so many problems. Surely I can't just make a difference. Well, I tell people all the time, you might think that, may not be true at all, but the impact of everybody using their gifts in the community to make a difference, doing one thing, makes a huge difference together. We're going to talk about that more as we go. So my one thing was, I'm going to go out and start covering and removing gang tattoos for free for people that are trying to change their lives. And what I thought was going to be a nice little thing, I did like 3 or 4 a month, blew up in a big positive way because the WGN News did a story on it. And I had a studio set up in the basement of my house. Let's think about this. Let's break this down for a minute. I'm doing gang tattoo removals for people I don't know that are telling me I'm leaving gang life. Please help me get rid of this tattoo. In my house, in my basement, when my kids are upstairs doing homework and my wife's cooking dinner. Probably not the brightest thing I've ever decided to do or how to do it. But it blew up in a big way. One day I was given an update on the ministry at church when a friend of mine, his name is Agent Brian Smith, he's with the Department of Homeland Security. They're getting a lot of press right now. He's an amazing guy. He's a narcotics agent. And he came up to me after I had given the update and he said, Chris, I would love for you to come and meet with my gang unit, see if you guys can work together. And I was very excited because I was working with state and local authorities, police officers, judges, probation officers. But to get the chance to work with federal authorities when you look like me and they don't shackle you to a table and ask you questions for 12 hours is a pretty awesome experience. So I took him up on it, and as I was going up that day for the meeting, he called me and he said, hey, do you mind if my trafficking team sits in on this? They want to hear what you're doing. So what does drug trafficking have to do with removing tattoos? And he said, no, this is sex trafficking. And I remember exactly what I said. It's like, that doesn't even happen here. It happens in Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe and places over there, one of those over there problems. He said, it does happen over there, but it happens right here too. And we'll educate you, we'll bring you up to speed, give you an understanding of it. So I said, yeah, let's do it. Did the gang presentation, hit it off, we decided to partner up. And then I said one thing that changed my life and my family's lives forever. I said, can you please educate me about human trafficking and sex trafficking because I have no idea this is going on. He said, yeah, no problem. Sex trafficking and human trafficking is the second biggest growing crime in America after drug sales. And it's quickly approaching number 1. There's an estimated 300 to 400,000 American teenagers, this is just teenagers, being forcibly sold into prostitution in this country, in this state, and in this community every year. How many of you guys have heard about sex trafficking at all? Okay. It's encouraging to me to hear that because I speak at schools all over, junior highs, high schools, colleges, And then every time it's like more and more hands are raised, so it's good that people are learning about it. But people are like, well, I don't see it. You know, we have this kind of idea of what prostitution looks like. You know, Julia Roberts and Pretty Woman, what the movies tell us. You know, short skirts and high heels, and I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but that's not what sex trafficking looks like. I could bring 10 survivors of sex trafficking into this room and put them in chairs with you all, and you wouldn't be able to pick them out. They look just like Melissa. Now I share this picture because she's okayed it. She's an FBI witness now, and she's a paid advocate. But she was picked up in Naperville. Anybody from Naperville here? All right, a few of you. I love Naperville, but nobody loves Naperville more than the people that live in Naperville. And when I tell them that this is going on in their community, or any community, they get quite upset. Because this is, in my opinion, the sickest, most heinous crime that takes place in this country. And we're going to talk a lot about it. Who's heard of Backpage.com? Okay. Backpage.com is like Craigslist. Okay, you guys know about Craigslist? Okay, so you can go on, you can sell your car, your couch, whatever you want to sell on Craigslist. Backpage.com is under a federal subpoena right now. They're under investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice for engaging in sex trafficking. This is a screenshot that I took for this area. On Backpage.com, every single day, there are literally thousands of ads placed by human traffickers or pimps, okay? When you click on these, it opens up, there's pictures, and there's more information and stuff I just won't tell you about because it's disgusting. I blacked out some of it because it was just too much to show, phone numbers and stuff. And the thing is, a lot of these ads, whether they're a minor or an adult, it doesn't matter because it's illegal. One thing I will say though, with Backpage.com especially, a percentage of these are federal agents posing as victims, trying to lure Johns in to be arrested. There was just a bust that took place in Aurora, at a hotel, 2 months ago. They arrested 18 men in 2 hours, trying to solicit sex from a 16-year-old girl, or who they thought was a 16-year-old girl. It was an Aurora PD officer and a federal agent that was posing. And 2 of those guys that they arrested lived in Oswego, where I live. One of them lives directly across the street from my church, and I met him. So this is something that's going on all across the country. Big cities, inner cities, suburbs, rural areas. I was just out in Macomb, Illinois, and they were talking about it out there in a town of like 3,000 people. So it's everywhere. It's going on. They gave me this high-level picture of what's going on with human trafficking in the United States. You know, they told me it goes on Backpage.com. It happens in strip clubs. Massage parlors are a huge issue, and even some on the streets and working in hotels. But I said, what do tattoos have to do with this? And I'll tell you, before I get into that, I've been a tattoo artist for 23 years. I love tattoos. I'm passionate about it. Not just creating artwork, but I'm very passionate about the history and the meanings and all that, things that go with tattoos. Sex trafficking tattoos, I'm gonna show you some, are the most disgusting things I've ever seen in my life. Not because of the tattoo or the quality of the tattoo or what, but the fact that somebody forced a tattoo on them to mark them as property. You know, we hear branding. When we hear the word branding, we think like cattle or livestock. That's exactly what this is. Federal law enforcement calls this branding because they're forcibly tattooing the victims as marking them as property. Here's some pictures for you. Anybody tell me what those pictures are? Barcodes, right? What has a barcode in our everyday life? Product. It is everything from this bottle of water to everything we buy. It marks that product. When you go to the store and buy a bottle of Coke and they scan it, It brings up who made it, when it was manufactured, where it was manufactured, all the details about that product. People will ask me, well, I have a scanner on my smartphone. What happens if I scan that? Absolutely nothing. They're not functional barcodes. What they are is just a visual reminder, a visual marker to symbolize this is not a person, this is product. What's terrifying though is where I have all these blacked out lines, there are number and letter codes, just like all the UPC barcodes with the product that we buy. They have number and letter codes that are tied to underground databases that pimps and traffickers will and do use to buy, sell, and trade people across country. Okay? So I'll give you a scenario of why it's so important to get rid of these tattoos once they're rescued. Let's say there's a 16-year-old girl, she's got a barcode tattoo on her neck. They're always in high visibility areas. The side of the neck, the back of the neck, the hands, those pimps and traffickers want that barcode to be seen, or that tattoo. You'll see other tattoos. They want that to be seen because they want people to know that's my product. If a pimp in Chicago sees this 16-year-old girl with the barcode tattoo and they don't know them, they'll pull them off the street. They'll access that number and letter code below the tattoo to see if they're in the system. If they are, it will tell them who she is, who her pimp is that owns her, how to contact that person. You can use that word for a trafficker or a pimp. Do they have siblings? Pimps and traffickers use all kinds of information to keep those victims doing what they want them to do. They'll threaten them, they'll beat them regularly, sexual assault happens, drugs are a huge issue. They're forced to take things like heroin, methamphetamine, that are then supplied by the pimp to keep them under control, keep them doing what they want them to do. And it's just, we were talking before, it's like I hear story after story after story that makes my head want to explode, that something so disgusting and atrocious happens in this world, anywhere in this world today. That makes me sick. So we do a lot of barcode tattoo removal. Now, this is important to note because every once in a while I'll get a phone call and somebody will tell me, hey Chris, I was at Walgreens and there was a girl with a barcode tattoo on her arm. You think she'd be in traffic? Could be. There was a trend, luckily it was a very short-lived trend in the 90s, where people were getting barcode tattoos. I think it was tied to some science fiction movie. So not all barcode tattoos are connected to trafficking, but certainly quite a few of them are. So here's a sample on the back of the neck. I was just down in Louisville, Kentucky last week and I covered one of these. It just breaks my heart every time I see it. So here's a couple more for you. This one here on the left, tattoo on the left, she was trafficked. There was a pimp. His name was Alex Campbell. His nickname was a cowboy. I don't know why, because he don't look anything like a cowboy to me, but he had 17 girls. It was the biggest case that's ever been brought to justice in the Chicago area to date. He had 17 girls that were working on Backpage.com, strip clubs, and massage parlors. They were forced to work 6 days a week, up to 18 hours a day. They kept not a penny that the Johns paid them for sexual acts. They were forced to do it. A lot of them had kids because of this. They got pregnant, they had the babies, they don't know who the fathers are. So the kids were taken to Alex Campbell's sister and she was raising these children, right? Horrific abuse, horrific drug, forced drug use, heroin. But Alex Campbell was caught. He was actually caught up in a sting coming out of the Cook County Courthouse on California Street. And they busted him walking to his car. But I was reading a story while I was in a church meeting one morning. The judge had just sentenced Campbell to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And I was applauding that because he wouldn't be able to hurt anybody again. But I read a quote that the judge had said in the sentencing hearing. And he said, I'm giving you life without parole because of the horrific crimes that you put onto these girls. They're going to have that for the rest of their lives. They're going to constantly remember and have PTSD and flash back to what you did to them, what you forced them into. But I'm also giving you life in prison because you forced these tattoos on them with your name on the side of their neck. So every time they brush their teeth or brush their hair, or somebody comes up to them on the street and says, hey, what's that tattoo mean? They're gonna be brought right back to that same place and time where you did all this to them. And I'm giving you life in prison. I read it, and I called my friend Brian Smith at Homeland Security. And I said, can you please put me in contact with the prosecutor or the judge? I want to get word that we can remove those tattoos. 5 minutes later, no lie, I got a phone call from then State's Attorney Anita Alvarez. And she asked if we could help. I said, yes, let's start. Next day I had the first 2 girls in. It took us about a year to remove all 17 of the tattoos, but they're all gone. Next month, I'm going to Terre Haute to the federal penitentiary where Alex Campbell is serving his life sentence currently. And I'm going to meet with him in a room with a lot of guards and show him pictures of all 17 of those girls that no longer carry the brand of his name, and talk with him for a story that I'm working on. But it was the biggest and most horrific story that I've dealt with so far. The tattoo on the right, it's hard to make out because it's a horrible tattoo. That tattoo says, Kevin Johnson's property. The woman who had that tattoo on her lower back was a 32-year-old school teacher, elementary school teacher from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Her and her husband, Kevin Johnson, started experimenting with drugs and became addicted to methamphetamine. While she would work all day at school, he would force her to go out and prostitute herself at night to get the money that they needed to feed their drug habit. He was arrested, prosecuted, and charged for human trafficking. He's sentenced to 25 years in the Iowa State Penitentiary. These are just some other examples of things that we see here on the left. Pimps' names, very common. The bottom right, sometimes we'll see nicknames that these pimps and traffickers will give to these girls. But the one on the top right is a new trend that I'm finding especially disturbing. It's a little scary how we're gonna handle it. Gangs are becoming involved in human trafficking. Gangs in Chicago, we watch the news, we know what's going on in Chicago with the guns and the drugs and everything else. But now gangs are becoming very well versed in human trafficking. Where their chief way of making money was selling guns and drugs for decades, they know now that they can take 10 to 20 victims, put them out in the morning and say, don't come back here until you have $1,000 or $1,500 or $2,000, whatever the quota is. Everyone that's trafficked has a daily quota. And if they don't bring that money back by a certain time of day, they're beaten, they're assaulted, they're drugged, they're sold, any variety of horrific things can happen to them. So gangs are becoming very involved in it. I cover a lot of gang tattoos that were on trafficking victims. That's a huge rise in what we're seeing with that this year. This was the very first trafficking tattoo that I removed. It's a young woman named Angela. Now, when you're removing trafficking tattoos, it's a whole lot different mentally than covering or removing gang tattoos. When I have a former gang member in my shop or in my mobile unit, I'll ask them whatever. I know enough about that world to be able to have that conversation. But when it comes to human trafficking, they have been mentally and physically abused for whatever period of time in horrible ways. And PTSD is rampant in that, post-traumatic stress disorder. And I don't ever want to ask the wrong thing. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to look the wrong way. Casey, if you can imagine for a minute that you've been victimized in sex trafficking and you're brought into a tattoo shop, the last tattoo shop you were in, you got this horrific brand forced on you, and you walk in my shop and you see this in front of you. I'm 6'5", 350 pounds, covered in tattoos. I'm not the nicest looking person on the planet, and I get that. So I'm trying to build up rapport with somebody who's been victimized. When she came in with her victim specialist, she told me some of her story. I'll share that with you. When she was 15 years old, she was living just outside of Oakland, California. Her parents were both sentenced, charged and convicted and sentenced to long prison terms for drug manufacturing and distribution. So the state sent her to live with her grandmother, which given the situation seemed, I guess, probably like the best possible outcome. But they didn't know at that time that her grandmother had a crack cocaine habit. So one day she was at the house, drug dealer came to the house to collect his money, and she didn't have it. And he said, I'm coming back tomorrow at noon. If you don't have my money, I'm taking her. He pointed to Angela. Came back the next day, she didn't have the money. So he forcibly took Angela, kicking and screaming. Time went by and she didn't have the money. He sold her to a trafficker. This drug dealer sold her to a trafficker, where she was forced up and down the coast of California, from Oakland to San Diego, and sold numerous times a day against her will. Drugged, beaten, assaulted. Then she was sold to another trafficker in Arizona. That trafficker trafficked her from Arizona to Vegas, up into Utah, across to Colorado, across the United States, into Chicago, finally. 4 years she was trafficked against her will before she was rescued by the FBI. Her pimp was tried and convicted. He's doing life in prison. She told me this story, this being the very first time I've been face to face with a sex trafficking survivor. I was pretty much doing the best I could just to keep my jaw from sitting on the floor that day. And I was with her for about 3 hours that afternoon here in office. I finished up, showed her that the tattoo was gone. She was elated that it was gone. She broke down, tears of joy. She's never gonna have to see that again. I was crying, the victim specialist was crying. I looked at her and I said, could I just ask you one question? And she said, yeah, of course. I said, do you know how much money that was that your grandmother owed that drug dealer? And she looked at the floor and looked up and said it was $75. This young woman's life was changed forever for $75 worth of crack cocaine. Don't tell me that drugs are a humongous issue that lead to horrific things other than just the drug issue. This girl's life is never gonna be the same, no matter how many tattoos she gets removed, how many hours of counseling she goes through, how many programs she successfully finishes up. She's always gonna have gone through that. And it absolutely breaks my heart. I want to give you a little bit of hope, though. There is hope. This is my friend Nicole. Nicole was also, as you can see, a survivor from the atrocities perpetuated by Alex Campbell. And I worked with Nicole. She had 2 tattoos, actually. She had the tattoo that you see on her neck, and she had broken a lot of rules. These pimps and traffickers have rules for their victims. She had broken these rules so many times, he tattooed them on the back, on her whole back, going down her back. So I worked with her. I did 15 sessions to remove all of her tattoos. When you sit and you hear the stories and you get to know them and you build up a conversation and some kind of relationship with them while you're helping them out, they open up to you. It's funny because being a tattoo artist anyways is kind of like, bartenders say they're amateur therapists. Tattoo artists are kind of the same way, which is a little scary because we're certainly not qualified to be therapists. But she opened up to me. And all the things that she had told me over that year, I would have very easily been able to justify her going away, finding a little house on a lake somewhere, and living out the rest of her life like a hermit, and not working with society, not being part of society. But she said that's not what she wanted to do. She wanted to turn that horrific mess into something positive. So she started talking to me and brainstorming with me, and I would just hear her out. She was very passionate about making an impact, and I loved it. I thought it was amazing. She called me up about 3 months later after I did her last tattoo removal session, And she was telling me about a vote that was taking place. She lives up in Wisconsin, I can say that. Can't say specifically where, but she's in Wisconsin. She wrote this program out called John School. John School is an equivalent to when people get a DUI and they have to take 8 weeks of classes about alcohol and drinking and driving and all that goes along with it. John School is that for prostitution. People who are picked up for soliciting prostitution. So she wrote this amazing curriculum for 8 weeks. These predators have to go and take this class as a requirement of the court. And I was amazed. She sent me a copy of it to read through it. And she asked me if I'd share some pictures with them of my work and stuff, so we did that. Then I got a phone call about 2 months later. And she said, hey, can you come up to Wisconsin? I want you to check out this class and see what you think, see if it's impactful. I said, sure, I'll come check it out. I went there, because of Chicago traffic, I was probably about 15 minutes late getting there. I walk in the door of an auditorium probably twice the size of this, full of all men that were arrested for solicitation of prostitution. And down at the podium, I see little Nicole. She's teaching this class. She's turning her tragedy into something triumphant and sharing her pain and what she went through to help these Johns, the buyers of sex, understand the impact on her life and the others that they tried to victimize. Because when people are arrested for solicitation of prostitution, it's not typically the first time it's happened, it's the first time they've been caught. So she does an amazing job with that. One of the other trends I talked about, gangs that we're seeing, I hate to have to even say this because it's disgusting. Pimps would always say they didn't want to deface the product. The product is the face. They would never put the tattoos on the face. Now that we're seeing the proliferation of gangs and the sex trafficking, they don't care. Okay? Gangs proudly wear their tattoos on their face. It's something that I can never understand. As hard as I try to, I could never understand why people would want to tattoo their face, especially when they're committing crime on a daily basis. Makes it kind of easy to be spotted in the lineup. But this was a young woman who, I'm going to show you one of her other tattoos here in a second, but this was a removal. I don't do laser tattoo removal. I don't believe in it. It's horrible to your skin and your body. Basically, when they hit your skin with a laser, it's a blue and a red laser that they use typically, and it breaks that ink apart under your skin. You see, when we do a tattoo, the ink is a liquid, but when it heals up and settles under your skin, it becomes a very fine powder that bonds together. So they'll hit that with a laser, and it breaks it apart under your skin. When you ask them where it goes, they say, oh, your body reabsorbs it. Okay, cool, but where does your body reabsorb it? Does it go to your kidneys and go out? Does it go to your liver? Does it go to your lymphatic system and become something horrible down the road? I don't know. So I use a product called Tattoo Vanish. Tattoo Vanish is a natural compound. It's been around for 7 years now. It was developed by a dermatology nurse in Vegas. And basically what happens is I set up a tattoo machine like I'm applying a tattoo, but I dip that needle in lidocaine. And I go over the entire tattoo that they want to get rid of. After we've opened up the top 2 layers of skin with the tattoo needle, we take cotton swabs and apply the Tattoo Vanish gel to that skin area. Tattoo Vanish is very simple, and I really wish I would have thought of this because I'd be a millionaire right now. It's pharmaceutical grade saline solution and citric acid. It's salt and lemon juice on steroids, basically. What it does for that 10-minute period, it goes into that skin that's exposed and bonds to that tattoo ink under their skin. It bonds to that ink, and then I wipe it away in 10 minutes. Over the 2-week period that follows that, the body rejects it and pushes it back out to the surface of the skin. But because it bonded to the ink, it pulls the ink along with it to the surface of the skin. It forms a scab. In about 2 weeks, that scab falls off. The ink is gone. Generally, It's not a one-time, one-shot process. Most of the times it takes us between 5 and 8 sessions to completely remove a tattoo. But the benefit is it completely pulls the ink from their skin. It's not there anymore. It's not traveling around their body. There's no scarring that takes place. When you get laser tattoo removal, it's like basically like giving yourself a 3rd-degree burn. It blisters, it scars, it's horrific. So there's no scarring. And when you do laser tattoo removal, there's like a white halo or a white version of the tattoo. You don't get any of that with Tattoo Vanish. So that's why we use it. We also do cover-up tattoos. When it comes to sex trafficking, most of our stuff is removals. We try to encourage them to remove the tattoo because a lot of times they're on the hands, the neck, or the face. Sorry about that. If the tattoo is on the hands, the neck, or the face, we will only do a removal because we want people to be able to go out and get a job and support themselves. And McDonald's will hardly hire you if you have a tattoo on your face or your neck. But this tattoo was on her ankle. She was trafficked by the Imperial Gangsters on the south side by Cicero. And most times when we have a trafficking survivor and they opt to do a cover-up, I'll ask them, what do you want to cover it with? And they'll look at me and they're like, I don't even care, just like put a black blob over it, just I don't want to see it. I'm like, well, I'm still an artist. You know, I've been doing art my whole life, and I want to give you something that's positive, that symbolizes transformation and growth. And so I looked at this and I'm like, well, butterfly would be pretty easy. So we did that. She loves it. I just saw her 2 weeks ago and she's doing fantastic. And her face is all healed up. It's completely gone too. We got new updated pictures coming on that soon. We did a documentary 3 years ago. We wanted to do something to kind of mark the end of that part of their journey. You know, when they're dealing with the aftercare process of being rescued out of trafficking, you're talking about a process that's going to take the rest of their lives. The removing of the tattoo branding is a significant step, but it is just one step in that process. So we wanted to do a kind of a punctuation mark on it and close that out. And we wanted a way to remember them. So I painted a tree on an 8-foot by 8-foot canvas in the back of the shop where I do all my work. And every time I do a trafficking removal, they have the opportunity, it's not a requirement by any means, but nobody's ever said no. They can dip their hand in whatever color paint they want and put it up on the tree to portray leaves. And it's just a way for them to show other people that are going through the same situation, you're not alone. It's horrible that you're not alone, but you're not alone. There's thousands and thousands of victims. And the other thing they do is they have the opportunity to write messages on the other side of the board, because the first thing that happens when any time a survivor comes in with their agency, they've heard about this wall, and they go there, and before we ever sit down and look at the tattoo or fill out paperwork, and they read all those messages. And it proves to them, it shows, hey, you're not alone. There's others, and I want to be one. I want to be a voice now for the others and help prevent this thing. This young woman that you see here, I can't even say woman, she's the very youngest trafficking survivor that I've personally worked with. She was 13 years old. She's also the only trafficking survivor that I've ever worked with in my life that was kidnapped. Every other one was a runaway, they were homeless, they were out on the streets, different situations. She was the first one that was kidnapped. She was kidnapped from a shopping mall in Des Moines, Iowa, at a food court. I talk to my kids all the time about being safe. Talk to my kids about going to the mall. My now 18-year-old hated me for the last 2 years because I wouldn't let her go to Fox Valley Mall by herself or with her friends. Like, I know too much. I know too much. I've seen too much. And it's just about education and letting people know that this does go on. There are the fake modeling schemes and all this stuff. There's people that will follow you out to your car. Social media is a huge issue. My daughter Mackenzie came to me 2 years ago. She was 16 years old. I just finished removing a sex trafficking tattoo that day, and when I remove it, one of those tattoos, a sex trafficking tattoo, I don't book anything else the rest of that night because it's extremely emotional, it's infuriating, and I have to process it. My daughter went to Oswego High School, which is directly behind my shop. She walked over that day and sat down and kind of let me be for about 30 minutes. And she said, Dad, I have an idea. There's something I think you should add to the ministry or your work. I said, great, that's all I need is more work. I was kind of working myself into the ground at that time. And she said, well, based on what we've heard from survivors, based on what I hear when I go to events with you, different things we read, I know that pimps and traffickers will utilize social media to prey upon victims and recruit and groom victims, as well as gangs. I said, yeah, that's true. She said, well, I think you should teach a social media safety class. Bring in kids and their parents and have a conversation about the safe use of social media, something that was meant for something great, as a powerful tool, has now been transformed and degraded into a power of evil by some, and just trying to make people aware of that and keep each other safe and not put themselves or their friends or their family at risk on social media. I kind of sat back in my chair and rubbed my head a little bit and looked at her and I said, Mac, that's a great idea. I think you should do that. And at 16, her eyes got about that big. She looked at me and said, Dad, I'm only 16, what can I do? I looked at her and I said, nobody knows social media better than a 16-year-old girl. Truth? Okay. So then I told her, I said, don't worry about it. I said, let's do this. We'll teach it together. And she was cool with that. So we went and worked with the FBI Internet Crimes Division. They were great, and they still are great with us. They helped us build a curriculum. They help us alter it and bring in new things as we go along, as time goes. We've been teaching that class for the last 2 years together. It's brought us together in a great way. And it's really important for parents and kids to have that conversation, because I'm a minister, I work with youth groups, and I talk to kids all the time that on the outside look like they got it all going on and they're all good. And then I get to know them and hear the backstory and what's really going on in their life, and it's terrifying. So there's things that we can all do. That's what it's all about. Like I kind of talked about a little in the beginning. There's so much going on in the world right now, right? But we all have gifts. We all have talents. We all have abilities. And we all have dreams, hopes, and goals. And hope is key. Because we're living in a world right now where a lot of our world and a lot of our communities lack hope. So I think it's a little bit incumbent upon all of us to inject a little bit of hope. So, we can talk about things like this. This is amazing. The response tonight, you guys all coming out, is fantastic to hear about this. Because this is something that's going on right here in Aurora, Oswego, Naperville. It's happening everywhere. Whether it's the biggest city, the inner city, the rural areas, the suburbs here, it's huge everywhere. Be safe on social media. We had a situation with my daughter, Mackenzie. She played travel softball for years. And this was before I got into the whole sex trafficking, fighting, and doing this stuff with the FBI. She was playing for the Oswego Outlaws. So she posted on Facebook, she made the team, she was all excited. Who her team was, what level, who her coach was. And then she got her uniform. They all took pictures, posted on Facebook. Hey, here's my number. Here's my jersey. Isn't this cool looking? And then about 3 weeks later, my wife and I had to be up in the city for a doctor's appointment. She posted on Facebook, hey, my parents are in the city at an appointment. Can somebody pick me up and give me a ride to practice? We look back on that right now, at this point in our lives where we are in absolute terror. Because any predator can get into your social media. Don't think that because you have password protected, encrypted, all this stuff, that you're safe. There's no such thing. I thought I had all the tightest securities on all my social media profiles. The internet crimes folks hacked into my Facebook in 13 seconds. So So I look back on that now and I'm like, anybody could have looked at that data, that information, and gotten to my daughter. And it's pretty terrifying. You can volunteer with local organizations. Here in the Fox Valley, it's amazing how many great organizations there are. It's about finding what you're passionate about, whatever it is. What's your cause? What's your fight? What do you want to make an impact in? There are so many great organizations in this area that would love you to help. Volunteer a few hours here and there. And it makes a huge impact. When you get rich later in life, you can donate to organizations and keep us all going. But most importantly, I tell my kids this all the time, and I want to share it with you tonight. Don't be defined by your career, your paycheck, your house, your zip code. Be defined by the work that you do using your gifts to make an impact. Because I'll tell you, I worked for a Fortune 100 company doing logistics for 20 years. I made a $100,000 base salary. If I wanted something, I bought it. If I wanted to go somewhere, I went. One afternoon, I went and bought a $32,000 motorcycle without even talking to my wife. And I'm ashamed of that. I was miserable at that point in my life because I was unhappy. I would wake up in the morning and think, how many sick days do I have left to use up? I wasn't a good dad. I wasn't a good husband. I was there, but I was non-existent. My life changed when I was laid off. I lost my house. I lost our cars. I lost my motorcycle. I lost all those things that I thought were important. And then I got transformed, and I'm still being transformed, and I will be. That'll keep taking place until I'm done living on this earth. What I want to say to you tonight, I guess, is make an impact. Use your gifts. You guys are so blessed with some amazing gifts, right? Use those gifts to make an impact. You will sleep better every single night you did something random. Just random acts of kindness. Start with random acts of kindness. My son, 2 nights ago, we were taking some things to a friend at an apartment complex. There was an elderly woman laboring to take groceries into her house. 25 steps. My son went over and helped her take her groceries in. He made an impact on her. She'll make an impact on somebody the next day. We need to start a trickle-down effect of reaching out to our neighbors, mending those communities that are so damaged by the things that people in my generation or older are messing up, to be quite honest. Make an impact wherever you are, wherever you end up. Make an impact every day, and you'll sleep a lot better at night, and you'll love your life. So I want to thank you guys for having me tonight, and enjoy the food.
Thanks so much, Chris. Can we just have a huge another round of applause? So what Chris talked about tonight is an extremely large issue. Human trafficking affects all of us, and especially as high schoolers, it's an issue that we have to come face to face with. And our organization, Lifeline Advocates, my team and I, our mission is to be an aid to children around the world who are unreachable. And our goal is going to be to end human trafficking in the Chicagoland area. And the way we're going to do this is the Lifeline Olympics. Now, once again, the Lifeline Olympics is going to be a 1-week-long event. We hope to have students like you, faculty members and residential counselors form teams of 4. And all you have to do is make a team. With this team, for the next month and a half, you'll be tasked to fundraise $60 collectively. And all this money is going to be going to the Chicago Alliance Against Sexual Exploitation, an organization that works to advance public policy, awareness, and active criminalization against sex traffickers. So yeah, make a team to participate. Once again, you have to form a team of 4. And I'm so excited to see how much we fundraise. This is an amazing cause. Thank you so much once again, Chris.